Today is a Frida night. My wife's out of town, so instead of leaving the dog alone at home for hours, she's been hanging out here. Hello.
Weren't you just like chewing her out?
Look at these paws. Yeah, when the camera wasn't rolling, I was kicking the dog. But now I seem like I like her, don't I? Look at these paws.
Thank you, Frida.
She's back.
But our main guest is Brian Herrera, who's an AI expert, recruited by Lance.
Oh, glad you're blocking him. You're totally blocking his face. Thank you.
It was our show or the CIA?
So,
Homeland Security.
Lance recruited Brian because he thinks that we will disagree about AI. And so I'm going to start it off by saying that Lance is a conservative, worries about all these things that are destroying America. He thinks that taxes will destroy America, that political correctness may destroy America, that immigration may destroy America. And I say, not as much as a liberal, but as a science fiction guy, a science-y guy, that what's going to really change everything in America and every place else is AI as it gets more and more powerful, and eventually, human level powerful within, 60 to 100 years, and causes all aspects of normal life to be rejiggered. Where people are eventually, within 150 years, people don't have to die. They can have their brain and consciousness replicated. And they can live in some other container or in cyberspace. And the quote I keep bringing up is a friend of mine said that by the year 2100 there will be 1 trillion AIs on Earth. That doesn't mean 1 trillion robot butlers and girlfriends. It means 1 trillion. I just heard yesterday on the news that there are now more sensors in America, things that measure some aspect of the environment, the world, than there are people. And that seems right. Anyway, I think we had a little talk off camera.
Yeah.
You're not as... Well, go ahead.
I guess, yeah. So most of the stuff I did was in weak AI, which is normally where most of the research happens.
We should define weak AI versus...
So weak AI, there's weak AI and strong AI. So weak AI is basically just what the AI exists right now. It's able to solve some AI geared towards a specific problem, not general. It's very specific. It solves this scheduling problem, or it organizes this thing. And that's all that AI does.
Or the typical one I hear about is ones that you would install in sidewalks that would monitor traffic.
Yeah, but it's got a specific goal that it does, and that's all it really does. It can't figure anything outside of its goal, and that's because they're trained. When you do AIs like that, you have to train them. So you train them for like 3 months, and then they can figure out how to solve their problem, but only that problem.
Or like some powerful weak AI might be the AI that have become better able to play the game of Go than any human.
Yeah, and those are the ones that are out there. Like the Watson that IBM I think had was a expert system, but that's still a weak AI. It knew a lot of stuff, but it's still a weak AI. Strong AI is the one that starts approaching human level intelligence and consciousness. That's the one where you have to start talking about, do they have rights as human, like a human does.
And you think that's more than 100 years away.
I think it's not only is it more than 100 years away, it may not even be in the realm of like what we understand computers as of right now being possible. It may not be even in that.
Yes! Yeah!
We may have to figure out something completely different in computation.
Yeah.
And
you tell it, Brian.
So it may be possible, like it could be, but based on there's a chance, but it's kind of slim in my opinion.
Well, I'd agree that right now computers are still pretty linear. Not that I understand anything about the guts of computers, because I've never taken any computing classes, and I only have the vaguest understanding of neural nets. But
I think last time you mentioned Moore's law as your thing for like what. That's why you think it would get there, is because of the processing power increasing.
well, that not exactly. I think that Moore's law is the thing that the compactness of computers, is reduced by a certain the compactness increases by
Half. It doubles every 2 years.
depending on which there's a zillion versions of the law. But yeah, the things keep getting smaller, so you're able to pack more and more circuitry into a given volume. And given that, we're not too far away from the density of circuitry in a phone or whatever being roughly equivalent to the density of the circuitry in the human brain, which doesn't mean that they're at all equivalent. They're not.
And the main issue with that is when you're dealing in computer science, and you're measuring,
Lance, you're blocking it.
and you're trying to measure optimization and like solving a problem quickly in a computer, we don't really concern ourselves in computer science about processing speed. You don't account for it really. You do to an extent, but not really, because there's when you're measuring how fast a certain program can run, you're measuring it in a time complexity that doesn't account for processing speed. And a matter of fact, there are certain algorithms that exist that we can say this algorithm on any sizable list of numbers won't finish before like the heat death of the universe.
Right. There's the
And so even if you're
traveling salesman. Problem.
And so even if your processing speed keeps doubling, it won't matter for that problem set. It still won't finish any faster, because how fast that grows on your problem, how many numbers you're punching into it, it won't matter.
There's still so many different possible paths that the traveling salesman can take among 20 cities that it just can't go through them.
Yeah, and so those kind of problems are in computer science. It's P versus NP, which is basically just describing how hard it is for a computer to solve it.
But you still can come up with algorithms that are likely to come up with a solution for a given version of that problem that's within, say, 10% of optimum.
You can always kind of guarantee, and that's usually where like the weak AI stuff comes in for problems like that. You can always guarantee a solution. You just can't guarantee a good one. And that's one of the main issues with where AI is at right now, is you're just you'll get information, but you're not really sure if it's going to be useful information.
Well, I'd argue that the human solutions tend to be like that, good but not great.
Yeah, but we're still solving them better off the bat, kind of thing. Like having someone look at it can come up with a pretty decent solution that makes sense, where an AI is doing things that are kind of out of the box. And
because the AI doesn't work in any kind of context. The AI is not, it's not conscious, which means it's not conscious of context or the significance of anything. It doesn't understand anything in any actual way.
Yeah.
But here's my argument that this stuff is going to happen faster than you think it is.
Okay.
I mean, in science fiction predicts a lot of stuff. Most of it comes true, but it takes a lot longer than science fiction says it will take.
I still don't have my hoverboard, kind of thing.
No, but I mean, they had crappy kind of things they called hoverboards, and they just kept catching on fire. But we're going to have flying cars, but they're going to be a pain in the ass. They're going to be dangerous. I don't know if they're ever really going to, frickin' Dick Tracy, which wasn't even science, it was a comic strip in the 30s, or it had its heyday in the 30s, predicted wrist TVs. And in the 50s, 60s, 70s, everybody was predicting, video phones. And now we have them, everybody's got them if we want to use them. But, it took 30 years longer for those things to become super popular.
Yeah. I think my main issue with where you're at with having conscious or better AI, close to that strong AI, is just you would have to. You basically are. Everyone uses the metaphor that the brain is like a computer.
Yeah, well, that's
But
not. Yeah.
in order for strong AI to kind of exist and be a thing, that can no longer be a metaphor. You have to be able to say that the brain is a computer. Otherwise, you can't build a computer to do what it does.
Okay, so you have to understand what consciousness is and how the brain generates our mental experience.
Yeah, and even better, to break it down to the simplest point, you have to. Theory of computation is defined by this thing called a Turing machine.
Yeah, all right. And so at the very least, a computer has. It's not the Turing machine. The Turing machine and the Turing test are two different things.
Yeah, but the Turing machine is what defines what's computable.
Right.
If we can build a Turing machine to do it, then you can say that we can build a computer to do that.
Right. All right.
So-
But here's my argument: that evolution is opportunistic. In an incomplete way. Evolution will. First of all, there's the thing called teleology, which is, it's easy to read things into evolution to say that evolution wants this and wants that. And of course, evolution doesn't want anything. Evolution is a set of tendencies that genes that favor the reproduction of that organisms that are good at getting laid and making more of those organisms,
Yeah.
the better they are, the more they'll pass on those genes.
Yeah.
Excuse me, one thing, I'm a Republican, so I don't believe in evolution. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. So evolution, while it's not an intentional force, evolution, in effect, favors doable solutions, doable things that can happen both due to genetic changes and things that are helpful because they help the organism survive and reproduce. So evolution, without it being intentional, looks for simple solutions, things that are feasible and helpful in terms of genes and in terms of the physical structure and the abilities that these new structures generate.
Yeah.
So I would get most neural networks are simple. I mean, they may consist of a zillion parts, but the mechanisms of neural networks are pretty simple. They're feedback loops.
Yeah. The neural networks in computer science that exist right now, though, are caricatures of that. Because there's more than neural networks than just firing off the impulses between two neurons.
Right.
There's a lot of chemical reactions that go on in that whole thing, too.
Okay.
But you also have to talk about the interconnectivity of those things and what that creates.
But I would argue that if you found a simple neural net that works, an algorithm or what do you call the different neural nets? Different schema, different architecture?
Architectures would
All
be
right,
good
so
to find.
if you find a simple architecture that works in a mechanical system, it's likely that there's a meat system in the brain that it works in the same way because evolution favors simple solutions.
I think the only issue with that at the end of the day, for it to be able to say it works in a computer, is if you want to say that there would be a conscious machine, then what you have to do at the end of the day is prove that on a Turing machine, you can make a Turing machine conscious.
Okay, so
And that's where I'm saying the difficulty of it kind of fails, is because the Turing machine is a very simple structure in itself. But
yeah, everything can be boiled down to one simple little flippy deal that just processes
yeah,
that you don't need 10 to the 10th neurons. That you could simulate, if you could characterize what the brain does in computational terms, you could simulate it via one little, not even transistor, one little mechanism that just, according to a certain set of not too complicated rules, goes through a series of computations.
No, you're right. You could simulate it, and
Yeah.
I'll agree with that. But
And it would take forever because you got one little machine doing the work of 10 to the 10th neuron.
yeah, and I'll agree with that you can simulate it. But just because you can simulate it doesn't mean it's conscious.
No, you need a model. You need an accurate model of what consciousness is.
Yeah, and you would have to pump that model into a Turing machine at the end of
And
it.
I don't think it's unreasonable that, in general terms, to say that consciousness is widely shared information widely shared on a real-time basis among the brain's various specialist subsystems. It's close to Minsky's community of mind.
Sure, it's hard to like debate like what consciousness is because it's one of those things that
Well, everybody gets it wrong, has gotten it wrong for 3,000 years.
yeah, and it's one of those things where I assume you're conscious because it's the polite thing to do, but I don't really. It's impossible for me to prove anybody like you're conscious. I know I'm conscious because I exist in my own
Well,
stream of thought.
Can we agree that consciousness is, in terms of how you experience, the feeling that you exist because of the fully fleshed out picture of the world that you're receiving and your reactions to it? That you're presented with a fully fleshed out picture of the world, moment to moment, and in that picture of the world is a picture of yourself as a thinking being within the world.
Sure, yeah. You understand your own timeline almost, like you are conscious of your existence and your own
Yeah.
past, present, and what you hope the future to be, almost.
So, at the very least, consciousness is based on specialist subsystems within the brain being able to share information and with each other, and for each subsystem to understand the information that's being shared.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm going to use the say that you can't make a conscious machine right now because programs are syntactic. You can define a structure, but they have no semantic in them. They can't understand anything in that structure. They can only define the structure. Mm-hmm. So consciousness requires that semantic component,
Right,
which won't exist. It can't exist in a computer because they don't have a concept of it
Right,
in a
but
program.
The semantic idea, the fully fleshed, like when you talk about orange, either the color or the fruit or whatever, that exists within your consciousness within a net of associations. It's part of the set of fruit. You know how it tastes. You remember experiences with oranges and all. And so it's a fully fleshed out thing based on a highly developed network of associations. Everything is defined in terms of everything else.
Yeah, but the thing is consciousness is to me, it's not just you can't just, if a computer can understand what an apple is, like if you show a computer a picture of an apple and it says that's an apple, that happens already. There's image processing for that.
Yeah, but the computer doesn't have all the associations that we have with Apple.
But even if it had that, how can you say that's consciousness? Because then it could just be pulling up a bunch of rules, and that's still the syntax of the program. It doesn't have an actual understanding of the apple.
Well,
it can just mimic it.
We need a mathematical model of consciousness that probably has something to do with the overall flow of magnitude of shared information among the various parts of the brain. The Max Tegmark, I believe, has some kind of measure that I don't necessarily agree with, but at least he's out there postulating a measure.
Yeah.
That's based on traffic to some extent, information traffic. I would argue, though, that the universe not the universe, the brain, as at least the conscious arena of the brain, because there's plenty of stuff that doesn't make it into consciousness, but where consciousness is, you have all these specialist subsystems glued together in what may have been originally haphazard, but gets refined via neural net type feedback as the organism acquires experience. I mean, the babies are born with a gazillion dendrites, the connections among neurons, and then those dendrites get pruned, they die off as the brain figures out which connections are helpful and which connections don't do anything.
Yeah. Training.
And so dendrites are probably cheap as shit. Like we have a hard time generating new neurons, but we're always generating new dendrites.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that the brain, being interested in easy solutions, just throws out dendrites like they're nothing, and then lets the unproductive ones die off, and that this process continues as long as we're alive, and that it's not a particularly, algorithmically complicated process. I mean, in terms of taking a census of the connections, it's fantastically complicated, but the mechanisms are probably pretty simple, and which suggests to me that AI, the people working in AI, will sooner rather than later be able to replicate these fairly simple processes and have it eventually, and not too long from now, not more than 80 years from now, have it result in computational structures that experience things in ways that we would call conscious.
I would still just argue that at the end of the day, what you're really just achieving is it can mimic it. It doesn't understand, but it just mimics. I feel like you're still missing something in that. Like,
I think that consciousness is kind of an as-if phenomenon, where even what we know, each of us knows we're conscious as individuals, and we can assume that other individuals are conscious because everybody's got the same hardware.
but you can't really assume other people are conscious. You assume it because it's like, otherwise it's weird to communicate with people. You'll just be socially awkward.
Well, you can
the whole
make
time.
probabilistic arguments.
Yeah, you can.
You're not the only.
You can make the assumption. It's easy to make the assumption,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, that's all you can do is make the assumption. And so that's the issue with strong AI and arguing for that is it's the Chinese room argument that they always come up with that stuff. Where as long as you have
we should define the Chinese room. That if when you talk to somebody who knows Chinese, you know that they know Chinese. But you could also have something generate Chinese, say translated from English to Chinese, if you put a bunch of people in a room, or machines, that just followed simple rules. Everybody takes part of this task, and you've got, 20 people in a room, and they're each, working from guidebooks, and, the effect is the same as, the output is the same as talking to somebody who knows English and Chinese. You talk to them in English, they say whatever you say back to you. In English, they say it back to you in Chinese. And you have this room full of people or machines or whatever, or some mix, and the room does the same job, even if not anybody in the room is individually conscious of Chinese.
Yeah, that's it. And so basically what you end up with is how complex is your rule book that they have. The guidebook that everyone in the room has, the complexity of that guidebook is how good the understand. Everyone outside of the room, when they read the Chinese, they'll be like, oh, this guy really knows his stuff based on the complexity of that rule book. So if you keep making that rule book more and more complex, then it seems like it's really good at Chinese, and it gets better at it as that rule book.
Still without being conscious.
It's just a mocker. It's a mimic. It just acts like it, and you
some-
can't tell the difference. It seems like it, but
Yeah, but
it's not. There's no understanding.
no, but it seems like you could differentiate in that somebody who knows English and Chinese that knowledge exists within a framework of many, many associations.
Yeah, it's almost like a meta language kind of thing that exists outside of it.
Like apparently, Google Translate has developed its own internal language in the interest of computational efficiency. That instead of Google translating from English to Latvian or Spanish to German, instead Google takes whatever source language it gets hit with and sends it to this center where it's got this meta language that maybe has some rudimentary understanding of relationships among words. Instead of going English Latvian, it goes English meta language, English to meta to Latvian.
Yeah. That makes sense. I didn't know about that, but that actually makes a lot of sense
It's
for
one
it
of
to
the
do
creepy
that.
things that's going on, along with AIs that can beat anybody at chess or Go or any number of video games.
But those are like an AI beating someone at chess is very easy for an AI to do.
Yeah.
Because the AI is looking 300 moves ahead, kind of thing. There's a hard limit to how far a human can technically see ahead. But I think just my main issue with you saying that if you get it close enough, you can get it to consciousness. Like if you can build the neuron and connect those together, you can get a consciousness out of it.
I would guess that you would be able to evolve a consciousness as long as you gave it the tools to do it with all sorts of dendritic glue.
So something it can reprogram itself, kind of thing, as it goes.
But that the rules for reprogramming, as you AI guys know, are all based on kind of these simple principles. And I would guess that if you gave a computational system enough Play-Doh, where the Play-Doh is all these circuits with all the ability to generate a bunch of associations and then prune those associations the way dendrites do that, you might be able to build systems that effectively become conscious. Consciousness is, we feel like things are ultimately real. We feel like we're the star of our own movie. Yeah. And I'd say but it's not, there's no base thing that is true, 100% authentic consciousness. That feeling I think is a byproduct of this massive information sharing. And we think we're conscious because we experience things as if we're conscious. That our own consciousnesses are to some extent simulated because they're built from these associations without there being some magic essentialism, some organ that is the seat of consciousness. No.
I'm not saying that there's like an organ that's like the seat of consciousness, like the soul's there. But what I'm arguing is that with the way computers are set up now, like the way we understand computers and computational theory and what we have, it's purely syntax in those machines. That's all they understand. And so it doesn't matter how much syntax you build up, how much rules you build up, the leap to semantic understanding can't happen. Like that's a leap that has to happen. So that's where I'm arguing is that there's no...
You're arguing the difference between like the number 4 in a computer as a set of rules versus the idea of 4 within consciousness as a rich collection of associations that can be understood within a human consciousness in a number of different contexts.
Yeah, but no, I'm arguing the understanding of it, not necessarily just the understanding, like the rules that can define that and the links that define that. It's the understanding, like the actual ability to understand that on a level, on a different. It's not the same as just like if I have the statement, like it's always that statement. This statement is false. A computer freaks out. It doesn't. There's no way with a syntax to understand that kind of a statement. But with someone that understands semantics in this, like if someone tells me this statement is false, I can just go, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to try to figure out if that statement's true or false. I'm just going to assume that guy's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's like the outside of that problem.
Yeah, well, because you have a rich supply of associations that help you in just about any context. Like, if you asked a computer, say, an AI, Watson, say, we have 4 people. They need to get from where they are. And all this has to be really super specified because Watson really doesn't understand words.
Yeah.
But the people have to get from here to someplace 100 miles from here. Watson, give me a list of ways people can go. Now, Watson might give you a list that includes a motorcycle. And that would show that Watson doesn't really understand 4 because we know kind of intuitively and inherently that 4 people don't fit on a motorcycle because of our rich collection of real world associations with what 4 means.
And yeah, and now if you were able to design Watson to have this ability to reprogram itself, so it came across that problem and you said, no, Watson, that you don't understand 4, and it reprograms itself to understand 4 and 4 doesn't fit on a motorcycle, I need to use a car, it still doesn't understand 4. And even if you kept doing that, it doesn't. If you kept building up like that and slowly built up Watson over time for all these different relationships like that and understand this connection of all these relationships, you haven't created a consciousness yet. You've just continued to build up Watson's rule book.
Yeah. Because, I mean, when we say 4 people, you get a mental image of 4 people standing there.
Yeah.
And you can use that within your consciousness to do whatever you want with. You don't need any further rules. You just know intuitively, via your experience, what 4 people mean, what the set of 4 people means within the world.
Yeah, but that's still that concept is still a semantic thing, which can't.
Yeah.
Programs aren't built to handle that. Like a software can't be built to handle
Sure.
that. And so if you have a computer that does understand that, it's based off of the rules that it's learning over
It's
time.
been programmed. It hasn't developed anything on its own.
It not necessarily has been programmed. It may have been trained to do it, it's still just building its core rule book.
Yeah. Well,
Is it possible that, let's say, for example, like you're taking an MRI of somebody and you play some Beethoven, and the image of the brain is stimulated to Beethoven, and then you play maybe some AC/DC, and there's a different image to something that's good and something. Is it possible to transfer that code, that coded image, into an artificial intelligence? Is that
Not really right now, because we don't understand enough about the brain. To the extent, yes, we've done experiments on a basic level with it, where there's one where they took like kind of a mouse brain material and put it into a robot and connected the motor centers to the wheels of a robot, and they turned it on and the robot kind of moved around. And they kind of noticed that every time they put a different mouse brain, the little robot would kind of act in a different way. And so that was kind of weird. So they understand enough that they can connect things like that together. And you see those in a lot of amputation people now, being able to connect their arm to a prosthetic that hooks to their brain.
they plus the system learn how to work the arm.
Yeah, but it's still not a computer. It's the brain and a computer working together.
You could argue, or I could try to argue that, all right, so you were missing the part of the neural system that controls the arm, because it got kind of wiped out along with the missing arm.
Mm.
But now you can grow a thing that will develop an interface that'll learn and develop a new relationship with the mechanical arm. I would argue you can take that all the way back into the brain, and if somebody was missing a chunk of brain, and if you had the right biocircuitry, you could patch the brain and to some extent have people learn how to exploit the new biocircuitry in a way that incorporates it into their experience.
No, I can see that one, because with the biocircuitry, that one would make more sense, because now you're operating a little bit outside of computers. You've added in this extra component of biology into it. So I can see that one a little bit more happening than just purely having a computer program getting to the point of human intelligence. But if you combine the two, I can see something happening more in that.
The computer, I mean, the brain doesn't program itself via a set of rules. It programs itself via feedback and pruning dendrites.
Yeah.
And you can imagine somebody old and rich, doesn't want to die, replacing his or her brain bit by bit with new biocircuitry that gets incorporated, 3%.
Yeah, then that's just, what is the argument with the, I forget, it's like the Greek ship one?
Is it's the same ship?
Is it the same ship when it comes?
If you replace 10% of the boards and nails or whatever of a ship every year, is it still the same ship 10 years later?
And so that would be my only thing with that one, is if you keep replacing them with all these computer parts, are they still?
And courts are going to have to deal with that, but it's also the Star Trek transporter mishap argument.
Yeah, that one's always fun.
The transporter makes two of you by mistake. Which of you is you? And the deal is, well, they're both you.
Yeah, and you can make that one darker by saying when every time you go to sleep, the you now dies and a new person wakes up in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those stream of consciousness things. It's like, how do you say that's not true?
Because we're used to it.
Yeah.
It's creepy. But we're used to the limitations of our thinking, and so we're not freaked out that, well, we probably lose, the things that happen to us in a normal day, we probably lose 99% of that experience after a week. We might be able to get it back if we had the right stimuli, but most of the time we don't run into the right combination unless something really like unusual happens.
Or important happens.
But like most of, everything that what's left of what I experienced in second grade? Like 1/10,000th? Less. And that massive loss of we should freak out, but we don't, because that's just what we are used to we're okay with the way our brains work.
Yeah. We have to be, otherwise it becomes uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you can also, if you can pay attention to a fun thing to do that will only make you a little crazy, is to catch your brain, catch part of your brain knowing something before the rest of your brain knows it. Like when you get the feeling like, I knew that was going to happen. Like you knock something off the table. If you knew it was going to happen, why did you knock it off the table? And that feeling that you knew was going to happen is likely part of your brain seeing what's going on before some other part of your brain gets word of it. So part of your brain is saying, that's falling, and the other part of the brain gets the news from that part of the brain. It's like, it's falling. It's like, oh shit, it's falling. How you knew that was going to happen?
It's the motor reflexes. It can't get it to the motor reflex in time to stop it.
Yeah. So do we have more to argue about? Do you think this stuff's going to take a gazillion years? I think it's going to take less than a gazillion years. Unless
we come up with some kind of new way of doing computers, I don't think you can do what the human brain does inside of a Turing machine. And that's where my problem is. Because that's where the whole field of what's computable matters. If you can't do it in a Turing machine, you cannot make a computer do it.
Okay.
And that's the hard line for it.
So do you Lance thinks 200, I asked him earlier today, do you think that 200 years from now, we're going to keep, everyday life is going to look like it does now? That, the people are pretty much still locked in their own heads. We're not telepathically linked. We still kind of have houses and families, and, we go to jobs. And do you think that life is going to...
I think where technology is going to be interesting is how much we're going to use the weaker AI stuff, and how much we're going to start letting the dumb AI control portions of our lives.
Do you think that's going to make it?
I think that's the one we need to be more worried about. Strong AI is, I don't think we need to worry about as much, but like the weak AI, like self-driving cars, and there's even AI that can do medical diagnosis of people now.
Well, do you think that's going to completely kick society's ass? Like, do you think that there's going to be mass unemployment and that we'll have to do like guaranteed minimum income, which is really another way of saying welfare, because AI is going to be taking the jobs of so many people?
It could, but I think some of the stuff is just how much we're willing to let AI, not just that, just how much we're willing to let AI dictate even our safety.
But won't we do that because market forces, because everything's going to be so cool and also so...
That's what I'm worried about, is having people jump to because everyone wants a self-driving car right now.
Yeah.
It's like the new thing, because then I don't have to do anything when I'm driving to work. I can sit there and do whatever I want. My car will get me there.
And what you want is to look at your phone.
Yeah, but the thing is the self-driving car has this issue where if it's going down the street at 50 and you got a semi-truck to the left of you, you got a sidewalk full of people to the right of you, and all of a sudden someone jumps in front of your car, your self-driving car can't stop in time because it's physically impossible for the mechanics to do it. So it either swerves to the left and you go under the truck, you swerve to the right and you go into the sidewalk with all the people, or you just barrel through the guy that stepped out in front of you.
Well, it's the same situation as with a person. The person has to make that same decision, and we let that person, in most cases, off the hook because we say they're only human. What could you do?
No, you're right, but my issue is are people ready to answer the question of, are you okay with the computer making the decision on who lives or dies? And that's the question that has to be asked, is having that computer gets to make that decision now with no human input. There's no human that sits behind that question and double checks the computer's answer. Yeah. It makes it then and now. And are you ready to be okay with having a 2-ton computer make the decision on whether or not you get to live or die?
I've been surprised by how okay we've turned out to be. That people, AI systems driving cars have been involved in a certain number of deaths.
Yeah.
And people aren't like marching on Washington. People aren't freaked out.
Yeah.
It seems like people think, yeah, we're going to figure it out. And like there was one, and sometimes it turns out that it's not the computer who's the asshole. There was one where an Uber driver had thought the computer was in charge of piloting the car, even though as the Uber driver she was supposed to be, and she was watching the voice on her phone.
Yeah.
And she hit somebody who walked out from between 2 parked cars.
Yeah. But
maybe we just need to have an end to female drivers.
Or the voice, I mean.
I would go, the voice, end the voice. That'd be fine. Yeah,
So give us an update, or if you have any insights in terms of if the military is using AI right now, and what is the future with AI amongst military?
The military talks about it all the time. I actually know for a fact in the South Korea and North Korea border, there's some machine gun turrets there that are programmed to an extent to be able to target a person and fire. Like it can do it automatically. Last time I heard they turned that feature off, and it needs a human to intervene before it opens fire. But there is an option that they just have to switch it on, and it will be able to recognize a target and engage it, and so open fire.
What you're saying is it's safe to say that if active combat breaks out between us or some other highly technical armed force, like South Korea, that as soon as things become... Well, as soon as the battle starts, all sorts of AI is going to kick in.
It already does to an extent. We already use a lot of AI for data. Like when you do spy satellites and all that stuff, you get a ton of data in, and military is always collecting data, and we always use AI to go through that data. The question is are we going to stick it in a robot with a gun now? And
probably, yeah.
Yeah, and being able to visually see something has already kind of happened. Computer imaging is already happening. They've been doing it for a while. There's always a joke out for neural networks when they first started, and I've never found the study that did this, but there's a joke for neural networks being kind of mistaken and questionable when some military organization was trying to get it to recognize a tank, an enemy tank. So they kept showing it a picture of a tank. They showed a friendly tank and an enemy tank, and they kept showing it pictures to train it on which one's the enemy, which one's a friendly tank. And when they kept testing it, when it would say, okay, I finished training, I'm like 99% accurate in my test now, so I'm done training. And they would go and test it, and it always got it wrong. And they figured out it was because every time they showed it enemy tank, it was cloudy, and every time they showed it a friendly tank, it was sunny. And so it didn't understand enemy or friend, it understood cloudy or sunny. So there is a lot of going into AI for military purposes. I don't know for sure, but I think there's some like discussions, like the war courts kind of, I forget what those are called, but discussing whether or not we should, because then it makes war too easy to just send a machine out to go, because then what are you losing?
Nobody's ever the only time at all that like people have kind of held back is maybe with a little bit of genetic engineering, where people decided to 20, 30 years ago, maybe we should take some of this slow. But generally, technological advances are just too juicy for people to say no to.
Well, yeah, the scientist isn't going to say no. But that's not the scientist's job to say no to some technological advancement. That's society's job. On whether or not we want to include that. So, like, genetic enhancement's already kind of happening. That's a thing that's with CRISPR
it's too juicy not to.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
If you can build a personalized cancer vaccine, which I think is how they saved Jimmy Carter from, terminal brain cancer. Well, all right, let's figure out the genetic profile of the tumor and build a personalized killer. And now Jimmy Carter's still around, Lance. Sorry, building houses.
So the last question.
So you've answered your own question. We shouldn't develop this.
2000 Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. Was that AI? Did he nail it? Would you say?
With Hal?
Yes.
I think that's always my favorite version of an AI, where it does it, where it kills everybody, but its reasoning is sound, kind of thing.
And they've done that in probably 300 movies.
All the sci-fi movie AIs are always kind of like that, where it's like, no, I'm totally right, and it kind of is. Where like it's always there's Asimov's 3 rules.
Yeah, 3 laws of robotics.
The 3 laws. That's what it is. And so it always finds a loophole in that, where it's like, well, I have to preserve you, but you're not preserving yourself.
What are the 3 rules?
A robot can't harm humans. A robot is obligated to protect itself if its actions don't harm humans. I don't know what the third one is.
I think it's through inaction can't cause harm to a human.
Yeah. But it's basically 3 ironclad rules that would be pretty good at keeping a robot from being a homicidal asshole.
And then the movies, it turns out that the robot comes to the logical conclusion that humans are destructive to themselves, so it has to remove humans' freedom in order to save the humans. So it keeps humans alive, but it imprisons them all.
It always comes to the wrong conclusion and becomes a menace.
But it's a sound conclusion for it. Like, based on its programming, it
it's
makes
like
sense.
It's the modern version of the monkey's paw, where you make a wish, and the monkey's paw is like, how can I turn this wish around and fuck you up with it?
Yeah.
Or making a deal with the devil. The devil's, no matter how you try to pin him down, he's gonna. Well, actually, the devil a lot of times does deliver, but sometimes he's an asshole.
It's how I learned to paint.
And fiddle.
Golden fiddle?
Yeah. Should we adjourn or?
I think so, hey?
Wait a minute,
Oh,
wait.
okay.
The reason I brought you here, now I'm going to reveal my AI information. Now, I brought Brian in as a I brought Brian in as a form of, in a way, it was an intervention because I need Rick to realize that there's no possibility he's going to get a robot girlfriend. And so Brian is his lifeline to sanity.
It's unfortunate that robot girlfriends already exist. It's just not going to have a meaningful conversation with them.
Well, you don't have them with women anyway.
I like pictures that stay still. So So you can really study them.
All right.
Plus, I'm married, so like,
Would your wife object?
to a robot girlfriend.
This is a whole another field of inquiry.
When Hugh Grant got caught getting a blowjob from Divine Brown in the late 90s, we had that discussion. It's like, I know that my wife operates under a zero tolerance policy.
What if it wasn't conscious? What if it's an head?
I still, if someone's, she wouldn't differentiate. She wouldn't
Okay.
differentiate between conscious or not. If there's some hot robot walking around the house, that wouldn't work. She has caught me looking at pictures on the internet, and that seems to be okay. At 4 in the morning once, I was up way too late, and some guy on ecstasy crashed into a bunch of cars on our block, and I went out and dealt with him, and I left the images up, and she was only slightly disappointed. But draws the line at robot girlfriend.
Okay.
All right, with that, we should probably.
All right, very good.
Brian, thank you.
Thank you.